Awesome. Perfect. Yes, this is a flawless transition. Clearly, you all have thought about the order at which you've put us because we're here to talk about preparing your community for invasive pests. And by we, I mean, hello, my name is Zeima Kassahun. I'm with the Washington Department of Natural Resources in the Urban and Community Forestry Program, where I serve as the Urban and Community Forestry Specialist, and I will be co-presenting today with my colleague, M. Roberts, and I'll hand it over to her for a quick second to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm M. Roberts. I am the Urban Forestry Technician for Western Washington at DNR's Urban and Community Forestry Program. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. All right, I'll go ahead and get us started. So before I get started, there are a few QR codes in this presentation. So if you don't catch it the first time, my final slide will have all the QR codes so you can collect them while questions are being answered or as we transition to the next presentation. So we are here today because our forests are under threat of emerging and existing invasive pests. So this results in a lot of cross-team collaboration with the Department of Natural Resources, as well as the Washington Invasive Species Council, who presented just a couple presentations ago, as well as various other organizations, agencies, universities, and tribal groups. So the Department of Natural Resources UCF program has been around since the 1990s. And since the inception of our program, we've mostly been funded through the USDA's Forest Service. And this funding was supplemented in 2021 when RCW 76-15-100 was passed into the state legislature, which for the first time provided us with significant long-term state funding to supplement our program. And this was more informally known as the Evergreens Community Act 2.0. So the Department of Natural Resources Urban and Community Forestry Program, which from this point on we'll be referring to as either DNR UCF or just UCF. Our mission is to create self-sustaining urban and community forestry programs that preserve, plant, and manage forests and trees for public benefit and quality of life. We really want to focus on the word self-sustaining here. So we're here primarily to provide assistance and resources to as many community partners as we can to help them foster local urban forestry programs and initiatives. A massive role in healthy and sustainable forestry practices is the resilience and mitigation of emerging or ongoing invasive pest infestations. So we worked closely with various partners, as I mentioned, such as the Washington Invasive Species Council, as well as WSU and various other partners across the state to help prepare for a threat to our state's urban forests, like Mediterranean oak borer, which, as many of you know, is a threat to many trees, including the native Oregon white oak, Quercus cariana. So we provide assistance to partners by providing 3 buckets of assistance. Our first bucket is educational assistance, which looks like hosting educational seminars and presentations on all sorts of tree topics. For instance, teaching city crews how to properly structurally prune young trees, or helping to identify strategic locations for tree placement, or even just talking through how to host an Arbor Day event. When we provide educational assistance, we also offer resources, research tools, and guides that can help back up our claims and help our constituents make management decisions. So next, we've got our technical assistance, which we play a statewide role in. And so we will review urban forestry policies, review tree ordinances or comprehensive plans that include trees and that a community may be producing or updating. So for example, reviewing proposed ordinances to ensure that they're as all-encompassing or realistic as possible. And lastly, we've got financial assistance, which comes from our program in the form of Arbor Day grants, Arbor Day reimbursements, as well as our annual Community Forestry Assistance Grant Program. We are non-regulatory, so we function more as advisors. Our staff is available to provide technical assistance to local governments, 501c3 nonprofits, tribes, and educational institutions. The Urban Forest Pest Readiness Playbook was created to close readiness gaps by helping communities identify actions they can take to be and feel more prepared in case of an urban forest pest infestation, similar to what Ian was just speaking of. So this playbook is created for urban foresters, arborists working on a local level. And it was created in 2019 with Farm Bill funding from USDA under an interagency agreement with the DNR's UCF and the Washington Invasive Species Council. So the goal is to close the readiness gaps by identifying areas that require improvement and how they can begin to take action. So successful use of this playbook will depend on a flexible approach where actions and tasks are implemented strategically and opportunistically. And users can prioritize those actions based on the gaps that are identified via self-assessment in the pest readiness playbook. So the playbook is comprehensive, it's in-depth, and it's here to help people prepare for forest pest outbreaks, such as MOB, or Mediterranean oak borer. The pest readiness playbook can provide an understanding of the baseline at which your community stands currently and help identify what actions are needed to become more prepared. So one of the first recommended actions is to go through that self-assessment. And then from there, you can identify community-specific readiness actions that your team has gone through, the self-assessment. So an example is doing a citywide inventory of your trees to get a better understanding of which species are where, what your overall composition might look like, and help you plan in the long run. So finally, each community has the option to create pest-specific response plans. So the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the Oregon Department of Forestry, they're currently trapping for MOB. They're monitoring and mapping active infestations and testing efficacy of multiple management strategies, all of which are steps included in the playbook. And so if your area is currently working on MOB-specific response plans, let us know. We'd love to get involved and see how the pest readiness playbook can help you. So the playbook can be found, we have the QR code here, but you can also find it on the DNR's website, on the Urban and Community Forestry webpage towards the very bottom of the homepage under Urban Tree Learning Center. So the pest readiness self-assessment asks 20 questions that help answer the question, is your community forest pest ready? So the 4 sections that are quizzed are section 1, understanding risk. So first and foremost, if you're not aware of what natural resources or trees we're trying to protect or how to identify them, then we won't know the vulnerability of those resources. The next section is capacity to support a response. The section addresses how ready we are to expand our detection efforts, reporting efforts, and the ability to act within the capacity of the people, programs, and partnerships already existing within our communities. Section 3 is the ability to expedite informed decision-making, which gets at the fact that misinformation or slow-paced decision-making diminishes our ability to effectively respond to pest outbreaks and protect our community's trees. This section gauges how ready communities are to make decisions related to pest management. And section 4 is community support to expand your impact. Without community support, you could risk poor communication and lack of information spread across the system. With urban pest outbreaks, it's key that there is a unified management approach and message. So based on the results of the self-assessment, your community will be able to identify actions that can help improve pest readiness in the short and long term. Arguably, understanding risk is the most important aspect of pest management to consider because it shifts our frame of mind from reactive management to proactive management. So often we don't realize the value of a resource until it's gone or being attacked. If we're not aware of what we have and the benefits that it provides us, we're not going to be invested in its protection and we won't be aware of its vulnerabilities. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to Em to take it on home.
Thanks, Zeima. The Urban Forest Pest Readiness Project is a 3-phased collaboration between the Washington Invasive Species Council and the Department of Natural Resources Urban and Community Forestry Program to provide urban forest pest education and tools to folks that work in urban forestry or adjacent fields across Washington state. We recently completed phase 2, which contained, among other tools, a few regional pest readiness workshops and an urban forest pest virtual summit. Phase 3 will provide 3 more regional workshops to be held this year and next, and an in-person urban forest pest summit, which will take place in 2025. as well as other tools coming your way. You can find more information about past and upcoming events on the Washington Invasive Species Council or DNR UCF websites. The DNR's Urban and Community Forestry program also offers educational and technical assistance on any urban forestry or arboriculture topic, in addition to pest readiness, as well as financial assistance. We also wanted to mention tree inventory data aggregation as it relates to the pest readiness project. If you have an urban tree inventory, you can contact Daria Gostula or Drew Lyons from DNR's Urban and Community Forestry program, and you can find their contact information on our website. And they can make you a pest susceptibility tool that you can use interactively that is specific to your community. Our GIS analyst Drew Lyons and our inventory team, led by Daria Gostula, teamed up to develop an aggregated database of over 500,000 urban trees from 57 locations throughout Washington state in a user-friendly map format. We add to this inventory and map annually as we fund new inventory projects, and we plan to begin a report that summarizes findings from this data within the year. This data is instrumental in planning and developing the funding and assistance of urban forest management plans across the state. The applications of an aggregated inventory are endless. These tools can help identify at-risk areas and pinpoint outreach and partner engagement. Urban tree inventories quantify and identify species in the canopy, which allows managers to identify those areas within the urban canopy that are more vulnerable to infestation and subsequent tree loss. This is a screenshot of DNR Urban and Community Forestry Pest Susceptibility Tool, also developed by our GIS analyst, Drew. If a community has existing tree inventory data, we can upload it into our pest susceptibility dashboard to show and tell the community which trees, how many trees, and how susceptible each species is in their community to any pests you see here. This dashboard will help map areas of high and low susceptibility to any of these forest pests based on the inventory data your community provides. Tools like this make the intersection of urban trees and invasive species easier to digest, ideally reducing the time from pest introduction to long-term management and hopefully, in some circumstances, even eradication. The Community Forestry Assistance Grants Program supports local jurisdictions in implementing improvements to their urban forest for an equitable delivery of tree ecosystem services in Washington state. This year, DNR's UCF program had $7 million in grant money to distribute awards ranging from $10,000 to $350,000 per project. This grant cycle was augmented by an additional $1 million from the Climate Commitment Act. We received over 120 applications for more than $22 million in projects and ended up funding a total of $8 million in grants to 45 recipients. Types of projects include canopy assessments and program planning, tree inventory and maintenance, community engagement and training, and tree planting and restoration. Many of these initiatives relate directly to pest management of our urban forests. Funding these municipalities to develop and manage a healthy and diverse urban forest, as well as being able to map and inventory their trees, can help prevent, detect, or respond to urban forest pests. This was a huge year for Washington DNR and the most grant funding allocated by our UCF program ever. We anticipate that the next few years will be pivotal for our urban greenscapes. You can find a list of recipients here along with a summary of their projects and intended goals. We will continue to collaborate with and assist community partners in the face of a changing climate and increased vulnerability of the urban forests through Phase 3 of the Pest Readiness Project, continuing to build pest susceptibility tools for communities who have shared inventory data upon request, continuing to map inventory Washington's urban forest, and tracking and monitoring the progress of grant-funded projects over the next few years through this grant cycle. Thank you for taking the time to join us today and learn more about preparing your community for invasive pests, which has been brought to you from Washington DNR's Urban and Community Forestry Program. Contact information for your presenters, Zeima Kassahun, and myself, M. Roberts, can be found here. If you'd like to download the Pest Readiness Playbook, the QR code on the bottom left will take you there. And in the bottom right, the QR code will take you to the 2024 grant recipients and their projects. We so appreciate your interest and your time today. And if we have time, we'd welcome any questions that you have.